Okay, Tiffany, I'm going to try to make a quick video for you about trying to figure out the base directions for Prism when you're looking at the lensometer. And then after that, we'll go into a little bit more detail about exactly how to figure out the amount of Prism and also the base direction, of course. So if you kind of always look at the prism reticle, I know you only see this one in particular each time that you look in the lensometer. It's all about trying to imagine what lens you're actually looking at. So, thinking about, is the nose of the patient on the right or is it on the left of the lens? You see how when you look at this eye right here, the nose is to the right of the patient's eye. And when you look at the left lens, the nose is to the left of the patient's eye. It may be helpful because right's on the right and the left is on the left. So that makes it kind of right on the right, left on the left. Kind of like a little saying or whatnot. So when you look into the lensometer, you kind of can imagine that as well too. All right, you can see the nose here in the center, right here. And if we look at the right eye, again, just like it was with the actual pair of glasses when we saw it that way, you see the nose is on the right, and for the left eye, the nose is on the left. So right on the right, left on the left. All right, so when we bring the component of the actual lensometer points, right, the lensometer power lines, most of the time they're going to be centered right at the center of the target, which means that they're centered right over top of the patient's eye. I don't know if I'm going to be able to grab that without. Alright, so that's not going to work. So you remember before they were right here at the center of the spots. That means they're right here, right? So the optical centers are located right over top of their eyes. With Prism, when we have Prism in the prescription, these the power lines are no longer going to be located at the center. They're going to be anywhere else other than the center. So they could be any of these places, anywhere at all, other than the center. That means there's Prism. Up and down is pretty easy. Up or down. So if you think of this very center of this green line here, of the sphere lines and the cylinder lines, if you think of this very center of this target as the base of the prism, then when we move it up, when we have a certain amount of base up prism, we move this target somewhere up here. If we're going straight up and we only have base up prism, we go right up this line. Anything to the right or to the left of the target means that we have some amount of either base in or base out prism. So if we just want base up, then we move straight up along this line here. If we just want base down, then we move straight along this line right here, base down. Base in and out is dependent on which eye we're looking at. Remember, that was the whole trick to it, was to try to figure out where the nose was. So if we're dealing with a right lens, the nose is on the right. And if we want base in prism, we want to move the base in along this line, straight along this line. If we have just straight base in prism, we move it in along this line. If we wanted base out prism, we move it straight out along this line so that we don't have any up or down as well as out. And that's the same situation over here. When we want to move base up prism, we move it straight up on this line. Base down prism, straight down on this line. Base in prism, left eye, left nose is on the left. We move it base in to the left. Or base out over here along this line to the right. We go out, away from the nose, in, towards the nose, base in, base out. When we want to talk about a mount, that's the next thing. All prism has a base direction. When we want to talk about a mount, we want to use this scale. We want to use these scales here. This whole thing is a scale if you look at it. It's concentric rings that progressively, this starts at 0, so there's absolutely no prism if everything aligns there at the center. But then as we go out, we get to this first circle, and that's a half of a diopter. It's not marked, but it's a half of a diopter. This is the one that has the additional little legs coming out in these little areas. The next circle is the 1 diopter ring. Then we have the 2 diopter ring, and the third diopter ring. In between each of these amounts is 1/10 of a diopter of prism. So if we zoom in here and look at this target, remember this was the half, and then we have the rest of them are marked 1, 2, and 3. In between 2 whole amounts, for say between 1 and 2, we have tenths of a diopter, tenths of a diopter. So halfway between that point, we have 1.5 diopters of prism. And you can see we moved straight up on the horizontal, straight up on this line here. So we went 1/2 of a diopter up. It also works out that, let's say we had our power scale right here, all right? You have to kind of figure out what's halfway point. So if our halfway point, we see that here and here is 1 and 2. Halfway is about right there. So that gives us a better idea of how to estimate where this guy is. If this is 1 and this is 2, if this is 1, 1.5, and 2, then where does this fall? It falls right in between 1.5 and 2. So right in between 1.5 and 2 is 1.7 or 1.8. So if our power lines over here were centered right there, we'd say that we had 1.7 diopters base up prism. All right. Let me get out of that, back out of that, back to the drawing. All right, so also all of that relates directly to this as well too. Remember, this was right on the center, and we're on the left eye here. We're right on the center, there's no prism. That's equal to the center of this target, right? So remember, if we move up, base up, what that looks like here is we have it here and we go base up along that line, or base down, all right, or base in, or base out. see that the base of the prism is out with respect to the patient's eye. And the base of the prism is in with respect to the patient's eye. All right? So that's how you kind of think about it. So here's the diagram that you're seeing when you look at your worksheet. And let me get some green here. You have a series of X's all over this in different places, right? All that it means is that it just represents different places that the lens, that the power crosses could cross at. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples with that. So I'm going to place a cross somewhere, and then we're going to solve and figure out how much prism and base direction that X is at. A couple of differences here. We still have this first circle is a half diopter, and this is 1, and this is 2, and this one's 3. But this diagram here actually marks the 4th and the 5th circles as well. That's just so that we could get more different prism amounts on the one scale. It still works the same. So let's place an X somewhere. Let's go here. Let's say that we cross right here at this point. The first things first, we need to know which eye that we're looking at. So let's deal with the right eye first. So we have the right eye. So that means right eye, nose is on the right, right? So we have our nose over here for the right eye. All right. The next thing we got to think about is that the very center of this target represents where the patient's eye is. All right. So now it's starting to come in, hopefully. All right. So we need to reference where this point is. This is the base of the prism. So the base of the prism, we need to determine where it's at. We look at these two vertical and horizontal lines, this horizontal line and this vertical line, and we're going to use those to determine how far up from the 0 point we went and how far in or out we went. And we can already hopefully we can see that this point right here, with reference to this is the right eye, the base of the prism, that little green, that thing that I've got circled, the base of the prism is up and out from where the eye is. So it's up and out from the center. You see that? We went up and out. Up and out. All right. That's funny that little triangular shape just did that. I'm not going to go into all the theory of it, but that's kind of how it gets measured right there. In theory, that's kind of what you're doing with the finding the vertical and the horizontal squares, the root, that thing. So all right, so let's figure out how much we have. So put that back in there because that's the center of the eye. That's the pupil. So we already know, we can see that we have up and out, right? So we can make a little note of that. Have some base up and have base out prism. It's 2 compounding amounts. All right, to figure out how much we went up, this line right here basically divides this scale in half from top to bottom. This scale right here basically divides this into an in and an out, a right and a left side, right? We have this side of that line, and we have this side of that line. So we're going to use these to determine how far we went up and how far we went out. So since we've got base up marked over here, let's use that one first. So what we need to do is figure out how much we went up from that line. So we can go and draw a line parallel to that. And we can see that where we crossed on this line was right here at the 2. You see that? We crossed right over at the 2. So for this one, we have 2 diopters up. We went 2 diopters base up from the center of the target. So we would say I have 2 diopters base up. Now we got to figure out what our base out is, and we're going to run a line parallel to this line right here. So we have a line that goes straight down, and what we're looking for is where it crosses, so that we can figure out exactly how much we went out. So let's zoom in here. And if you look at this first line, this one's the 3, and this one's the 4. If we realize that we're not on any one in particular, so let's find that middle point. Let's kind of eyeball that. So we say, what's the halfway point between here and here? And it falls just beyond where the blue line's coming in. So if that would be 3.5, then we're probably at 3.4. So that would mean we write in here 3.4 diopters base out. So how this whole thing right here would be written out, the base up or out, neither one of those, you can put them either way you want. 2 diopters base up and 3.4 diopters base out. Didn't realize my battery was going. So I hope this helped you.